Okay, welcome back, friends. Um, I'm super excited about the conversation that I'm about to have because I know many of you are familiar with Professor Bob Gruber. He is a professor of philosophy at Springfield College. He and I co-taught a class together last semester with another professor from the psychology department, Professor Rick Parr. And he's one of students at Springfield College for their general education courses. He's one of their favorites. He's probably one of the great thinkers that I've met in the last 2 years. And he's got just such a nice way of explaining some really, really heavy stuff that I'm sure that this conversation will be enjoyable for both of us. So let's see if I can get him on the horn here. Hey, Bob, how are you?
Hey, I'm fine, hanging in there.
Good, joining us from a porch, I see. I like the lights hanging behind you.
That's right. I'm out on my porch.
Awesome.
It's nice enough for me to sit out here and talk with you.
Yeah, different ways of working in the last couple of weeks, huh?
Yes, definitely. It's weird.
Yeah, I know. It's a weird time. All right, so I want to jump right in. So I got a couple of rapid fire questions for you, okay? Because probably a lot of the people watching this will know who you are, but a bunch of my students maybe haven't taken a class with you. Maybe they want to take a class. Maybe they heard about you, and hopefully you'll share this with your students as well.
Yes.
Hopefully that'll be a little bit fun on both ends. So why don't you tell me who you are, what you teach, and how you got interested in that field?
Great. So I'm Bob Gruber. I teach philosophy classes. This semester I'm teaching an intro to philosophy class, and I'm also teaching a class on existentialism. Also, usually I teach an environmental ethics class. I've also been teaching philosophy of sport. My jam is environmental ethics.
Okay.
In particular, I think about the ethics of collective action, large groups of people trying to make some sort of moral evaluation of group activity
Okay.
is my interest.
Awesome. And so that's not only your interest, but that's also the field or the sect of philosophy that you also research as well?
Yes, yeah. So that's my research interest is in ethics, and yeah, in particular, the ethics of collective action.
Awesome. What do you do for fun?
For fun, well, recently I've been running a lot.
Okay.
I trained for a marathon and ran a marathon last summer.
Wow, good for
And then,
you.
yeah, it was fun. And then I stopped running, and now I'm going stir crazy inside. So I've been getting back into it.
Okay. Awesome. All right. So give me something, especially, you probably have somewhere close to 100 students this semester. And I think, you do a pretty good job of, you're yourself in the classroom. But what's something that your current students don't know about you that you think they would find interesting?
Huh. Something that they don't know that they would find interesting. Well, just like little factoids about myself.
Could be anything you want, man.
Okay, I like to bike. I've gone on long bike trips. I don't know if people know that I've done this. I biked from here down to North Carolina with some pals. Then we got in a van. We drove across the country to San Diego. Then we biked from San Diego up to Vancouver. It was like 2 months of biking.
That's amazing.
And I don't know if I tell too many students this, but anyone who's listening, come talk to me about it. I'll give you lots of tips, and it's something that I think people should try out.
I was gonna say that sounds like a pretty wild experience. I always told people when they graduate college, you should do some sort of, you know, solitary. Maybe you could do in a group, but some sort of adventure like that. Whether it's bikes your thing, motorcycle, hitchhike, but I can't endorse that. But you get the idea, right?
Yes,
You
totally.
got to do something to challenge yourself in some ways because that's how you really learn some really interesting things about yourself.
And you got to do something that's not in the norm, something outside of your normal mode, because that's when you really grow and
Yeah.
where you learn things that you didn't know before. Yeah.
Would you say that it's something just not outside the mode, but something outside of your comfort zone as well, or are those two different things?
Um, for some people they're the same thing.
Yeah.
I guess for other people they're different. I encourage people to go outside their comfort zone also.
Cool.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a particular question because you're the expert on this and you teach a class. in existentialism, right? Um, One of the other conversations I had with a chemistry professor was about the immediacy of the crisis that we're in right now
Mm.
versus the typical thing that we always hear about the existential threat of something like climate change. I know climate ethics is your big thing as well. So, I mean, have you been hearing the words existential crisis thrown around about this particular crisis? And I guess my follow-up question will be why or why not?
Yeah, I think that sometimes that term existential crisis is used to mean a situation where the very existence of human beings seems to be in the balance. Uh, I haven't heard that with this virus because I think that we already know the percentages of people that will die from it and people that will recover.
Right.
And it seems like humanity will survive this thing.
Sure.
um, but you know, there was a philosopher, Camus, and he wrote this book, The Plague. And I was thinking about getting my students to look at this a little bit. It's a novel, but in it, he's exploring these existential themes. And in the book, people start dying with this sickness that just appears out of nowhere.
Okay.
And I haven't read the book actually, so I don't know what his whole analysis of it, but I think it's existential because it sort of plays with the absurdity of human existence. Life is going on as normal, and then suddenly there's just this virus that appears on the scene.
Yeah.
And some of the characters in the book appear to just go about their life as usual while people around them are getting sick.
Yeah.
And maybe we see that today with people that are continuing to try to go about their life as normal, which is an absurd sort of thing to be doing. This is a radically different place for society to be in.
Right.
Those are some musings about the existential nature of this.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, again, maybe it's because I'm someone who is very extroverted, very social. I thrive on being around other people. Um, you know, I've really felt like this is a very small, and maybe it's a very selfish existential crisis, right? Because the things that I typically do and love are now all of a sudden stopped. You know, my hockey league is canceled. I can't go and have physics class face to face with my students. We can't have our Tuesday lunches with me and you and some of the other
Yes,
faculty.
yes. Well, this is precisely it. If you can't do what you normally do, then you have to confront these questions about all of those things that you've done. Are those things the things that define who you are? Have you just been kind of on autopilot in your life doing these things without really, taking it for granted what they bring you? And
Sure.
now you're in this position where you really need to think critically about who it is that you are, because you don't get to fall under that normal mode that you used to be in.
Right, absolutely. And I think that's one of the things that I've been, about a year and a half ago, I really tried to like buckle down and say like, why do I do the things that I do? And do I value that time? Because you only get so much time, and how much do you value it? And I really feel like I was in a place where I pared the things in my life down to the things that I really want to do versus I'm just doing them out of some necessity or some habit. And now it's like they're being cut out even more. I'm like, oh my gosh, I just finished this evaluative process, and now I have to rethink the entire thing again. It's really
Yeah.
strange. For me, this seems like maybe there's degrees of existential crises. Like this is a very local one versus a global one for me. But it's been a really weird thing. And, I have all the time in the world now, I guess, to sit and think about it.
Well, I mean, I think in a certain sense, you've done something that the existentialist philosophers would find admirable. Okay, you've gone through this process at the beginning of deciding to only do the things that you really value. So
Right.
you're taking control of your own life. So you get plus points for that.
Okay.
Right? But now you're here and you're unable to do any of those things. And the existentialists would tell you, even in this position where you're stuck inside, you still have some choice. You have autonomy. You're free, metaphysically speaking, to choose the things that you do and the things that you don't do. And how are you going to use this time now? If you just sit around in despair and be bored, that's bad faith. You're wasting your time.
Right. Right. Well, that's why I'm trying to do this, right? Because it's something that I never thought about doing, and and again, it's weird because I'm trying not to put this out there to burden people with more stuff to watch on the internet. But since like our lives have kind of shifted towards that, maybe it'll be hopefully some sort of reprieve for some people. So I know it's helping me through it, right? It's a new way of using the time to do something as opposed to sitting and thinking about, you know, something else or reading the news, which is always disastrous.
Yes. Yeah, stay away from the news. Well, it's important,
It's
but
important, right?
I fall into this trap where I'm just reading too much. Yeah.
That's right. All right. Okay. So how about you yourself? How are you handling kind of the isolation and the distancing from students and like your coworkers, et cetera?
Yeah, well, it's tough. Um, I've been doing some more baking.
Okay. What's your
I
what are you proud of right now?
I made some sourdough rolls.
Okay.
So that was fun, get the sourdough starter going and check in on it every day, see how it's developing, finally incorporate it with the dough, watch it rise. Plenty of time to just watch dough rise, So
Okay.
it's one of the things I've been doing. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Um, so one of the things that I find interesting, right, is I think that, you know, um, there was the abstract, right, of watching the crisis unfold around us and then thinking, okay, well, are we going to go do our teaching online? Is it going to be temporary? And then as those decisions are made, then it becomes real. And for us at Springfield College, right, classes start today on Monday. And so now it is real. So it went from being from the abstract to being real. What are some of the things that back when it was abstract that you thought would be challenges or that you were worried about versus now that it's real? Are things better than you thought, worse than you thought? Kind of where does it sit versus the here and now?
I guess I thought a challenge would be figuring out how to communicate in a way that felt like not just one-sided.
Yeah.
I can give information, but the challenge is how is it going to
Sorry about that. We had some technical difficulties there. It looks like bandwidth all over the state of Massachusetts and Connecticut is getting us. But Bob, you were saying that you 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 felt you didn't want the information to just be unidirectional, right?
Yeah, I was worried I wasn't going to get information back. So far, with the start of classes, I've been surprised. I've gotten a bunch of students returning communication to me, asking questions. We're all figuring this out together. I've even been on a Zoom call with a student already. I like that. I'm encouraging more of my students to stay in contact with me and with each other. That's a good way to get through this.
You've taken my next question, which was going to be if you had a message that you could send to not just your students, but any of my students or other students that might stumble upon this, what would be your message in this weird time for them to keep in mind?
I mean, I think to take risks in communication. This is weird. Let's just be honest. The Zoom thing.
Yeah.
It can be scary to sign into a Zoom meeting where your professor's just sitting there waiting for you. Take that risk because this is the only way we're going to be able to make it work.
Right.
And acknowledge that we're all figuring it out together.
Awesome. What about for your fellow faculty, right? I mean, you're someone who is fairly tech savvy. Here we are on Zoom together. We got the headsets on, right? But for some faculty, this is really, really a struggle for them. They're just as nervous as students are. What advice would you have for your fellow faculty in this day and age?
Well, I don't know if I've been getting positive feedback on this particular thing. So I'll say this.
Good.
Inject your personality into your teaching materials, however you put that out there. If you're going to write up some lectures, inject your personality into it a little bit.
Awesome.
So that it feels more human.
Yeah, because that's the big piece of this that seems to be missing, right, is the human element.
Yeah.
Last question for you, and then I'll let you get back to sourdough, baking bread, whatever the case may be. Aside from students, aside from faculty, what message do you have for humankind going through this?
I've been thinking a lot about this pandemic and our response to it.
Okay.
And there was at one point, I think it was Trump, someone said at a press conference, we have to save the most lives we can. That's why we're engaged in this dramatic sort of social distancing. And our economic activity is hampered because of this.
Yeah.
Dramatically. And I was thinking, why don't we take this same sort of response towards climate change? I mean, we're talking billions of future people whose lives will be much worse unless we take some sort of dramatic action. And so what's the difference?
Yeah.
Between a pandemic and something that's more abstract, I guess, like climate change. And so my message to humanity is to think about that a little bit.
You know, you're not the only one who has said this sort of thing, and I really think it boils down to the immediacy, right? Like, if this pandemic, if the government was out there saying there's this thing called, COVID-20, right, and everyone's going to get it, but don't worry, because it's going to take 10 to 15 years to possibly kill 1% of us.
Yes.
How would all this conversation change, right?
Yes. And of course, we recognize as a matter of human psychology, it's much easier to act when the situation is more immediate. But from an ethical perspective, I'm just reflecting on that comment. We need to save the most lives. If that's your guiding principle, what are we doing?
Right. Right. Gotcha. Well, Bob, this has been great. So hopefully my students will enjoy this. Hopefully you'll send this out to your students as well and give them something else to think about. Who knows, maybe you can use this as part of your class. It makes a lot more sense in your class than it does in my class, I guess, right?
But it's good to get everyone thinking about it. It's been a lot of fun to chat with you, James.
Awesome. And I look forward to, maybe we should just have Tuesday lunch and we could just like eat, like as though we're in Cheney together, but we can do it virtually.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, Bob, you have yourself a great rest of your afternoon, and thanks for being here.
Same to you. Bye, James.
Bye, Bob.